you need to get yourself, when you really start embarking on the world after university, and creating a really awesome property with amazing ideas, get yourself lawyers who understand all of these fields, because once an idea, one of the ideas and one of the branches on your transmedia project is stolen or in any way harmed by someone having bad intentions, the whole domino structure falls apart, and then the whole property stops to exist. And so you need to be surrounded with lawyers who can fight these multilateral battles as well for you.
I think that's a question.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question because, to my understanding, or at least my association with transmedia, implies also a certain dynamic. And as far as I understood now, when we're talking about different platforms here, movie, their game platform, and so on, there are, as you named in the beginning, each medium, so to speak, each platform has its own characteristics and develops then some aspects of one story, for instance. And I was wondering, do you see room that, for instance, one content starts at one platform and then, so to speak, the story starts to be developed further? I mean, not that you have a plot that is already completed, but you, I don't know, start with a fragment of a book and then try to have the content developed via another forum or online gaming or via Facebook or so. Do you see actually room for that? Or because it would require also a community which is very flexible and very used to all the medias. And I thought, I mean, my question is, it might be a little exhausting for somebody who wants to have a story, in order to learn about how the story develops, to look here and there and so on. But wouldn't that actually be real transmedia?
You're absolutely right. The example with The Matrix is exactly what you're saying. Okay. It's the first movie is followed by the game, is followed by the second movie, and the first movie had some some animation that preceded it. So you have a whole timeline that's split over 5-6 different media. I don't know if you know this, but Morpheus, one of the characters in The Matrix, died in the online game. But nobody knows because nobody played the online game. So it illustrates exactly what you're saying. It's that example, which is the example that most people think of when they're thinking of transmedia storytelling, pushed it a little too far. And this is why I love Pokemon as an example, because they've designed it as an experience that you enjoy, and they've designed it around the time that your child has to spend on that pastime. So your question marks, yes, that is a true transmedia storytelling experience, but it is a little challenging for everybody to get into. And I think that none of these platforms, none of these stories can be truly linked. You can't have absolute links that stop you from enjoying the world and enjoying the piece as an independent piece. I'll give you an example. My mom doesn't play video games, so she's never played Assassin's Creed, but she would love to read a book in that world. So
there has been a book.
There have been several books. But she'd love to pick up that book and read it. Okay?
Yeah, actually, there's been a really interesting experiment, and I'm sure this is going to take us into a cool future and some future applications of it someday. But there was a game called Sleep is Death. I don't know if you've heard of it. And this was created by a guy who created you basically have all the tools that a adventure game maker would have to his or her disposal. And this game can only be played with 2 people. And only online. So you have to be on 2 different computers, and one person sets up the world. He sort of populates a room with flower pots and stuff and puts a character in there, and he essentially comes up with a premise of what the story will be. And the other person then joins in and starts essentially improvising with that player. And together they start telling the story. And you don't know how the person is what they're going to click on, and you don't know if they're going to decide to, burn the flower pot and then set the house on fire, because you can do all this. You just type it in. You say burn flower pot and it'll do it. And all of a sudden, you are creating transmedia storytelling. Two people are working on something that is essentially what you're talking about, where you have a game and narrative and dialogue and even music and sounds, because you can also populate that with it. I think it's all feasible, but you know, the people that played Sleep is Death are, you know, sort of 12 perhaps in London, and it was not a huge success because it's very, very niche. To find people that will be able and will be willing to play games and read books and watch the movie and all that stuff is very difficult, and we don't need to please everybody. And that's what I'm trying to. Well, that's my goal, anyways. I want to give people that would only want to see a good film to see a kick-ass film. And if they say I've seen this great film, and then someone else says, "Why did you know there's also this amazing game around it?" That would be fantastic. But a great film by itself should be able to sell itself and to make it to recoup its money. But if you have both, you really win, right?
What you're saying was that you don't give. I understood transmedia storytelling as like a complete story that like it ends with a movie, continues with a film. This one continuous linear plot. But you say, okay, it doesn't need to be that way. So you have a film that stands for its own, and you have a video game that takes the world of the game or the property, like let's say characters or the world itself, and then creates a different story, different plot line.
Yes.
So the exciting thing is, it's both of those things.
Yeah.
It's whatever you want to make it. The idea behind all of this is, it's an incredibly exciting time for creators of stories, of characters, of worlds, to go and get their properties on different media and to explore different sides of those worlds in different ways. Nobody plays a game the same way they read a book or the same way they watch a movie. Every single one of those experiences is a different interaction with your player. And it's all about those different experiences. So what you're saying, it's absolutely for us to define. Transmedia doesn't mean really anything today except many different media. The only difference that I think is, and it's only semantics, is between cross-media, which is the same story on different media, Twilight being a great example, the book, the movie, the graphic novel, and transmedia, which is different sides of those worlds, different sides of those characters, and different media. That's the only distinction I'd like to make. So we have 10 more minutes, 7 more minutes. If there are any questions or any subjects that you'd like us to... Yes?
I'm just wondering, on cross-media, is it important that each platform share the same storyline or arc? And my second question is that if they do, don't they have the tendency to cannibalize each other?
Yeah. I think no. I mean, first of all, I think there are no rules, and as Julian just said, you know, we haven't quite defined what transmedia is because you can't really define. I think a person that actually put it quite well was Richard Wagner actually. It was Wagner when he coined the phrase of Gesamtkunstwerk, right? Because he combined these different fields seamlessly into opera. And what he turned opera into was an event and a spectacle unlike anything that anyone had ever seen before. He even lived within an opera because he was putting rose petals over all of his own house floors, and he was completely out of his mind. But without him, we probably wouldn't have Lord of the Rings now, and Peter Jackson wouldn't be alive and or doing what he's doing. This was a guy who I think invented it. In terms of cannibalizing each other, I agree. I mean, if you make a video game, like that Minority Report project, for instance, that I mentioned, we were essentially told, or at least the game company believed, that they had to emulate the story from the movie, but it would never look like the movie because, well, first of all, they weren't sharing art assets, but second of all, they didn't have the talent to make it look like Steven Spielberg's kick-ass crew that he had built up over 40 years, 30 years. But so all of a sudden this game looks like crap compared to the movie, and you think that you're playing the same thing, but it was unnecessary. The world of Minority Report is so interesting enough In Philip K. Dick's story, the idea of being able to, of being arrested, 5 minutes ahead of time, ahead of committing a crime or whatever it is, and you could build a great game out of that. What they decided to do is a game that is basically a game where you throw people off buildings and kill them, and you go, hang on a second, that doesn't make any sense within the world. So all of a sudden, the game crowd that should have been the key people to go see Minority Report played the game, and then they felt embittered about the whole thing. So quality can cannibalize the property, but also the idea of trying to emulate what the other one is doing is not, also in terms of story, is not necessary and sometimes even very destructive, I think.
Hello, so I'm a film and video game agent from London. I think, totally agree with you. I think just from experience of working with transmedia IP creators, Doom and Prince of Persia would be a prime example of the reason why you should not mesh the two. And when you're selling to a Hollywood agent, who I sometimes find have lack of imagination, it's really about, if I'm honest about franchise, I felt that you have to complement each other and keep, if there is that sort of, user generated content, that's fine, but I think totally agree with you in terms of making an individual project as good as it possibly can be. But yeah, I just want to say that.
In first.
I just have a question about finding a balance between having this one creative vision across all the media, but on the same side you don't want these creative egos as one person who maybe is claiming royalties or whatever.
So the question is about how to balance the one creative vision and the execution of that vision?
Well, I mean, how to balance having one creative vision, which is in the past would have been an author, and then you have to get royalties or whatever.
Absolutely.
Or just saying we're developing it ourselves in-house and whatever, and everyone has ownership of this, but is it still strong enough, and where's the ownership, and who owns it?
Well, it depends on the media company that you're talking to. I mean, one side of transmedia that we haven't discussed, which is the integrated business aspect of it. When a Disney does something that's transmedia, they own all of the channels and the production outlets. When it's an author, he's probably going to pair up with a media company. And then it comes down to a question of rights. And that's something that's extremely complex and differs from company to company.
So the strategy is more to do it in-house?
The current trend, the current business trend is to do it more in-house. For the creative side of that creation, it's important to keep in mind that with all of these strategies, you may have one creative vision, but there's an army of extremely talented people working on that vision too, and bringing something to it. So it may be synthesized by one person talking about it, and it may have been his or her vision to start off with, but it's a team or teams in the case of transmedia that actually perform that.
So in a way, it's a new generation of creatives as well who are...
Absolutely. And this is a point that Jörg is passionate about, but this distilling what can work in your world, in your property, in your characters, in your story on different media is something that basically a new breed of creatives is getting really good at. And Pokemon is another great example. I think that the generation that's coming up that have been born with video games, with Twitter, with Facebook, with social networks and crowdsourcing and all of these things and user-created content, that's going to be a really exciting time to be in a creative position, because these consumers today are going to be amazing creators of that type of thing. Sorry.
What do you think? I mean, speaking of Star Wars and transmedia and all stuff, I mean, there you had a sequel of like 3 films, for example, offering the first glimpse into this universe.
Are we talking about the first 3 films? Or
yeah, the first 3 films. Or
episode 1 to episode 3?
Yeah,
okay.
For example. But what if you stretch that kind of story from the get-go over different media? What do you think about this proposition? Because do you think it's very risky? Because then if somebody only sees the film, is not playing the game, doesn't experience the whole story, and it's that